Hello, everyone. I'm Kamraun.
And I'm Billy. Welcome to the HorseFrog podcast.
Today, we will be discussing Book 3, Chapter 9 of Gardens of the Moon, a novel in the Malazan Book of the Fallen. This chapter is dense, so we have split it into 2 episodes. This is part 2.
Now, this podcast series is intended to be a companion to reading or listening to the books set in the Malazan universe. It's not a book review, and it's not intended to be a replacement to reading the books. Know that Kamraun and I we know that this is the best story ever written, and that we will not be providing any literary critique. It's strictly fanboy.
Yes. We will be covering the events of the books in a linear fashion. There will be spoilers for those that have not read the books. We will try not to spoil anything prior to us covering that portion of the respective book. I don't think there's any violence today, is there?
Yeah, I don't think so, but we always like to give the disclaimer that some of this stuff does contain some graphic violence in it, but maybe this episode doesn't.
Yeah.
We're just covering ourselves.
Yeah. All right, Chapter 9, Part 2. We ended our last episode with Tayshrin storming into Dujak's office, interrupting the conversation between Dujak and Lorne. Tayshrin is cursing Dujak, saying, "Damn you! If you had a hand in this, I'll find it, and that is a promise." Dujak coolly asks, "A hand in what?" Tayshrin tells him there's been a fire at the Hall of Records in Pale, and it looks like the inside of an oven. Lorne stands up and asks Tayshrin why a fire in a bureaucrat's chamber should override all other considerations. Tayshrin clarifies that the Hall of Records contained the city's census lists, wherein all the names of Pale's nobility could be found. Dujak says that's unfortunate and asks if Tayshrin has begun an investigation. He offers his staff's services to Tayshrin. Tayshrin tells him that is unnecessary and rhetorically asks why make all of Dujak's other spies redundant. That's a really clever way to handle the issue with the excessive culling of Pale's nobility.
Yes.
I love how Dujak acts like he has no idea what's going on.
Oh, I love it too. It's actually quite funny. And I love him just being like, what? Oh, well, then let me help you look into that. It's like,
yeah.
But
crafty.
It is very crafty. But I don't know if we talked about this last episode, but the idea of the culling, I get it. But in a city like this, where we've lost a big chunk of population, do you need to cull something that's already been damaged by war, like they've been damaged?
Well, the nobles, they got panic rooms.
Yeah, they do.
They probably were all shored up in some underground basement for the apocalypse or whatever. Yeah. The billionaire bunkers.
Yes. Okay. Oh,
Tayshrin turns to the adjunct and apologizes for the ungracious reunion. Lorne tells him to save his apologies for later. She turns to Dujak and thanks him for the wine and conversation. Tayshrin stiffens when Lorne reveals she's been speaking with Dujak, and it satisfies her. Lorne asks if there will be a formal dinner later in the evening, and Dujak confirms there will. Lorne requests Tattersail's presence. Tayshrin flinches again, and Dujak eyes her with a new respect. Tayshrin interrupts, telling Lorne Tattersail has been ill as a result of the encounter with the Hound of Shadow, adding that he's sure Dujak has described this to her. Lorne thinks to herself that Dujak didn't explain the situation well enough, but lets Tayshrin imagine the worst. She says she's interested in a wizard's evaluation of the event. Tayshrin tells her she will have the evaluation shortly. Presumably he means from himself, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
Okay.
I think she just kind of used that as a moment to just say, I need to know what you think about this.
Okay.
So I don't know if it's to distract him but it worked.
Mm. Dujak excuses himself so he can check on Tattersail's health. He bows to the adjunct, then gives Tayshrin a curt nod before he leaves. Once Dujak is gone and the doors to the room close, Tayshrin says, "Adjunct, the situation is..." She interrupts, saying, "Absurd. Damn it, Tayshrin. Where's your sense? You've taken on the craftiest bastard the Empire military has ever had the privilege of possessing, and he's eating you alive. And you deserve it." He tries to speak, and she cuts him off, saying, "No, listen, Tayshrin. I speak directly from the Empress. She reluctantly approved your commandeering the assault on Moonspawn. But if she'd known you so thoroughly lack subtlety, she would never have permitted it. Do you take everyone else for fools?" Tayshrin says, "Dujak is just one man." Lorne tells him that Dujak is not the enemy, and has never been the enemy. Taishran tells her he's the Emperor's man. Lauren says that challenging Dujak's loyalty is insulting, and it's the very insult that may turn him. He's not just one man, he's 10,000, and in a year he'll be 25,000. He doesn't yield when pushed because he can't, due to the 10,000 soldiers at his back. When those 10,000 get angry enough to push back, Taishran won't be able to withstand them, and Dujak will end up being carried on the tide. Taishran says then he is a traitor. Lauren disagrees, saying he's a man who cares for those he's responsible for. He's the best of the Empire, and if he's forced to turn, then Lauren and Taishran are the traitors. That's pretty good perspective.
It is, and something with Lauren here, and in all of my read-throughs, is I've always liked her. You know, I've never disliked her. She's not very. She doesn't have that imperious nature. You know, she seems pretty pragmatic. Yes. And in the cases where she rubs shoulders with Perrin and with Dujak, you know, she seems to genuinely care about the army enough to, you know, at least get a feel for things. That may just be her what she's doing, but she's never done anything that makes me dislike her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. She asks if she's getting through to Taishran. He has a deep frown, but says she is getting through to him. He tells her that the task the Empress commanded of him is weighing heavily and not within his strengths. It may be better if he is dismissed. Lauren gives this serious consideration. She thinks mages by nature never command loyalty, but fear instead. Mages find loyalty difficult to understand or cope with. Long ago, there had been a mage who had commanded loyalty, the Emperor. That's interesting.
That is an interesting comment.
Yeah. Lauren says, "Hi, mage. We are all agreed on one thing. The old guard must disappear. All who stood with the Emperor and still cling to his memory will ever work against us, whether consciously or unconsciously. Dujak is an exception, and there are a handful of others like him. Those we must not lose. As for the others, they have to die. The risk lies in alerting them to that fact. If we're too open, we may end up with an insurrection the size of which could destroy the Empire."
You know, this is going back to that previous comment about mages commanding loyalty, and the Emperor was one of them. This is one of those few really rare insights we get into the Emperor.
Yeah.
You know,
Definitely.
There's not a whole lot said about him. And then I don't want to say anything too much, but, you know, even what we know about him now, we still don't know anything about him.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. He's a shadowy figure.
Yes, he is. Yes, he's quite definite. He's quite definitely the literal definition of shadowy figure.
Taishran says, "Apart from Dujak and Tattersail, we've cleaned out everyone else. As for Whiskey Jack and his squad, he's all yours, adjunct." I think this is the first official confirmation we've had that they want Whiskey Jack and his squad dead. Until now, it's all been suspicions voiced within the squad, right?
It is, and I don't recall it, now that you mention it, being spelled out this clearly. I don't recall it being, it's like, well, that's very direct. I did not think about that. So, sometimes those small lines, if you're not careful, you blow past them, and, you know, they don't stick as much as they do. This is one thing I've enjoyed doing, the in-depth that we've been doing.
Yes. I caught a number of things when I was writing my notes for this one. We'll get to them later.
Cool.
Lauren says, "With luck." This causes Taishran to wince, and she asks what's wrong. And this was in reference to talking about Whiskey Jack and his squad,
right?
Her being able to deal with them. She says, "With luck." He winces. She asks why. He tells her that he reads his deck of dragons nightly, and that he's certain Opan has entered the world of mortal affairs. Tattersail has confirmed his suspicions. This surprises Lauren, and she asks if Tattersail is an adept. Taishran says, "Far more adept than I." Lauren asks what he can tell her of Opan's involvement. Taishran says, "Darujistan." Lauren closes her eyes and says, "I was afraid you'd say that. We need Darujistan desperately. Its wealth coming into our hands would break this continent's back."
Yeah.
There is the Empire's motivation right there for conquering Darujistan.
Yeah. It's a linchpin. It's one of these, like, I'm assuming the key foothold on this continent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems to be, of the free cities, the most powerful.
Yeah. And I guess the wealthiest.
Yeah, wealthiest, most influential.
Yeah.
Taishran says he knows. He goes on to tell her that things are worse than she realizes, that he suspects Whiskey Jack and Tattersail are in league with one another. Lauren asks if there has been any word on Perrin. Tayshrin tells her there has been none, and that someone is either hiding him or his body. He thinks Perrin is dead, but his soul hasn't passed through Hood's gate, and only a mage could prevent that. Lauren asks if the mage could be Tattersail. Tayshrin thinks it's possible, and says he would like to know more about Perrin's role in the situation. Lauren hesitates, then tells him Perrin was engaged in a long, arduous search. Tayshrin growls, perhaps he found whatever he was seeking. Lauren says, perhaps, then asks how good Tattersail is. Tayshrin tells her that Tattersail is good enough to be a high mage and to survive a hound's attack, then drive it away, though he wouldn't think that's possible. Tayshrin admits even he would have difficulty with that. Lauren says maybe she had help. Tayshrin says he hadn't thought of that. Lauren tells him to think on it now, but before he does, the Empress requests that he continue his efforts, though not against Dujek. She informs him that he is needed as a conduit in case her mission in Darujistan goes poorly. Further, he is not to involve himself with the occupation of Pale, and that he is to provide Dujek with the details of Opan's appearance, noting that if a god has entered the fray, Dujek has a right to know and to plan accordingly. Tayshrin asks, right. How can one plan anything with Opan in the game? That's an excellent question.
Very good point.
Lauren says, leave that to Dujek.
If anyone could do it, it'd be him.
Was he going to flip a coin?
Yeah.
Yeah. How's he? Never mind.
I would trust Dujek is all I could say.
Yeah, definitely.
I trust his plan, the plan.
The plan. She asks if Tayshrin has difficulty with any of her instructions. He admits he is relieved. Lauren nods and says, good. Now I need a mundane healer and quarters. Tayshrin says, of course, and moves to leave. As he reaches the doors to the room, he turns and says, Adjunct, I'm glad you're here. She thanks him. After he leaves, she sinks in her chair and allows her mind to travel back 9 years to one night in the Mouse. She remembers blood everywhere and the empty faces of her mother, her father, and older brother. Their faces were numbed by the realization that they'd been spared, that the blood wasn't their own. As these memories fill her head, a name rides the winds. She whispers, Tattersail. So this is the answer to my question from last episode. Lauren was a child during the riots in the Mouse during the prologue in the book 9 years ago. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We go to Tattersail. She has found the strength to leave her bed. She stands at the window to the room, watching the goings-on in the street below. The street was crowded with military wagons. The systematic plunder that quartermasters called resupply was well underway. There is mention of the eviction of nobility and gentry from their familial estates for the stationing of the officer corps, of which Tattersail is one. The evictions had ended 3 days ago. The repairing of the outer walls, the refitting of gates, and the clearing of moon rain, in quotations, continued. Tattersail is glad she had missed the wagons of dead bodies being removed from the city. She had witnessed it before and had no desire to witness it again. Here's a quote I need to read. Quote, now shock and terror had seeped down and out of sight. Scenes of normality reappeared as farmers and merchants emerged from hiding to meet the needs of occupiers and occupied alike. Malazan healers had swept the city, rooting out the birthing of plague and treating common ailments among all those they touched. No citizen would have been turned from their path, and sentiments began the long, perfectly planned swing. End quote. I had to quote this for 2 reasons. One, Billy, he uses normality.
Yes, it has become, it's now accepted usage. Normalcy has fallen to the ancient ways.
Well, okay, normalcy was the new, okay.
Well, that's right, normalcy was new.
For everybody that hasn't listened to all of our episodes, there was a little tirade during our coverage of the boys where it was noted that we were using normalcy and that we thought that was the correct usage. And as it turned out, normality is in fact the original usage, and normalcy was made popular by, was it Woodrow Wilson? I can't remember which president it was.
Eisenhower, I think.
Okay. One of the presidents in the early side of the 1900s.
Yeah.
Right?
I think it was like in the 50s or 60s.
Okay.
When I think it was like 60 something, but yeah, that would have been Eisenhower.
Yeah. One of our Patreon subscribers, our first actually, Scott, reached out to us and informed us that normalcy was not, in fact, the common usage. Normality was the common usage. So I just thought it'd be fun to kind of poke at Billy a little bit, because the great Steven Erikson is using normality. Yes. So it seems like
I will yield. I will yield to Mr. Erikson.
All right. So the second point I wanted to bring up from this is interesting to see which tactics the Empire uses to stabilize the conquered society, aside from the culling of the nobility.
Absolutely.
Bringing in the healers, not turning anybody away.
That's a big one right there. It makes them seem like they care.
Yeah. Now, plant that in your mind, because I'm going to circle back to that at the latter side of this episode, because they don't always seem to care.
Right.
So we'll come back to that.
No, this is all about appearance. This is all about appearances. We understand this. We understand this.
This is like those free apps where they give you the loot boxes that are good at first to get you to buy more loot boxes.
Yeah. This is what they call. Isn't this what we call optics?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. This is the onboarding, right?
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. You'll get your packet along with your onboarding app, and you're good to go. It's welcome to the Empire. Get out now. It's like,
man, in my current job, I've had the pleasure or otherwise displeasure of working with a number of vendors and going through onboarding for software vendors, right, for their products as we purchase them, and it's always, they're willing to help you. They're very receptive to any feedback early on. They promise the world, and then you go live, and then they go dark.
Now, I am, of course, I'm going to have to reference. I have not done this in months, so you should be proud of me. It's South Park reference. Do you remember when they get the security system in the school, and it's like they're trying to get everything connected, and Mr. Mackey's so committed to getting this thing, and they just need to keep upgrading the package to get better customer service. You know what I'm talking about? But if you get the platinum upgrade, it's like...
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Goodness.
What's fun is, oh man, we're on a diversion here, but one of our vendors, we were paying for the highest package, and we had a dedicated client success manager, and then they got rid of that package. They're like, no, this is only for our big customers, the ones that have like 100,000 students, something along those lines. Yeah, this is our learning management system vendor. And I was like, man, this is crazy for the amount we're paying you, and you don't want us to pay extra for this. And they got rid of that tier. I guess they didn't want to pay people to be dedicated client success managers at that level. They only wanted, I think they only had like 10, 15 customers in total that hit that tier from that point onwards. So I guess the cost of paying people to be those just wasn't worth it. I don't know.
That would be very costly. I could see that.
Yeah, their support level went down after that.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
They don't care about the product. They don't care anymore.
Yeah.
Onboarding success.
All right, moving along here. As Tattersail's thoughts continue, she thinks soon there'd be the culling of the nobility, a scourge that would raise to the gallows the greediest, least liked nobles, and the executions would be public. A tried and true procedure that swelled recruitment on a tide of base vengeance, with every hand stained by a righteous glee. A sword in such hands completed the conspiracy and included all players in the hunt for the next victim to the cause, the Empire's cause. End quote. Yep, so turn them against each other.
Nope.
Tattersail had seen it run its course in 100 such cities. No matter how benign the original rulers, no matter how generous the nobility, the word of empire, weighted by might, twisted the past into a tyranny of demons, a sad comment on humanity, a bitter lesson made foul by her own role in it. Now, this echoes some of our past comments on the culling of the nobility.
Yeah.
That vicious undercurrent we were talking about.
Yeah. It spells it out very, very, but you can see how it's so successful. It's brilliant. It's really quite brilliant.
Yeah. And in there, they talk about people turning each other in. So it isn't even necessarily just the bad ones, right? The ones that are doing illegal stuff. It's anybody can be pointed out by somebody. If they don't like you, then you could get caught up in that and get. So
yeah, you got to be careful. So yeah.
Tattersail's thoughts turned to the bridge burners, and Whiskey Jack in particular. He was a strange counterpoint to the cynicism with which she viewed the world around her. He was a man with the world creeping in on all sides, a crumbling of his beliefs, a failing of faiths, leaving his squad as his last claim to humanity. That squad was filled with the only people that mattered to him anymore, and it was shrinking. But he held on and pushed back hard. Tattersail wanted to believe that he would win in the end, that he'd live to see his world stripped of the empire. Quick Ben and Kalam were trying to take the responsibility from him. It was their only way of loving him. She does note that they would never put it in such terms.
Yeah.
With the exception of Sari, Tattersail saw this same thing with all the other bridge burners. There was a desperation, an almost childlike yearning to relieve Whiskey Jack of everything their grim place had laid upon him. Tattersail had responded to them in a way deeper than she'd thought possible, from a core she'd long been convinced was burned out, the ashes scattered in silent lament, a core no mage could afford. Tattersail recognized the danger, but that only made it all the more alluring. And this is interesting, seeing the situation from the perspective of one of those devastating mages. You know, last episode, we mentioned, or actually you mentioned, how powerful mages are. We kind of talked about that for a little bit. It would be easy to see non-mages as disposable, given how easily they could be killed in a battle of magic, right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
To get attached to them, you're putting yourself at risk of getting hurt.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because you become attached, and attachments in and of themselves are a weakness.
Yes.
You know, they can be a strength and a weakness.
Mm-hmm. Tattersail thinks that Sari was another matter and avoided thinking of her altogether. Her thoughts wandered to Perrin. He was in the room behind her, oiling his sword, Chance. They hadn't spoken much in the 4 days since she'd woken up. There was too much distrust between them. She thinks to herself that perhaps it was the mystery, the uncertainty that made them so attractive to one another. The attraction was obvious. She senses a taut thread between them. The energy that burned between them felt dangerous, which made it exciting. I don't get that energy. I don't understand that.
I don't either.
Yeah. Hairlock had appeared earlier that morning, agitated about something. He didn't answer their queries. She suspected he had found a trail and it may take Hairlock out of Pale and onto Jeruzhistan. That was not a happy thought. Suddenly Tattersail stiffens as a ward she placed on the door is tripped. She warns Perrin they have a visitor. Perrin rose up, Chance held ready. Tattersail waves her hand and says, "You're no longer visible, Captain, nor can anyone sense your presence. Make no sound and wait here." She left the room and went to the outer chamber just as a knock sounded on the door. That whole motion has too much Jedi mind trick about it for me. I laughed at that image. Yeah, it's like, you're invisible now. It's like how you play with your kids. You know?
Right. We can't see you. That's great.
Tattersail opens the door to find a young Marine standing there. She asks what he wants. He bows and says, "High-Fist Dujek is inquiring as to your health, sorceress." She says, "Much better. That's kind of him. Now, if you'll..." The Marine interrupts and says, "If you answered as you just have, I am to convey the High-Fist's request that you attend a formal supper this evening in the main building." Tattersail curses silently, wishing she hadn't told the truth. Now it was too late. A request from her commander wasn't something she could deny. She tells the Marine to inform Dujek she'll be honored to share his company over supper and asks who else will be attending.
You know, she could have just pulled the Jedi mind stuff on him and said, "No, I'm sorry. No, I'm not feeling better."
Yes. That would have been an easier way to handle this.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
The Marine says, "High Mage Taishrin, a messenger named Talk the Younger, and Adjunct Lorne. Tattersail says, Adjunct Lorne is here? The Marine says she arrived this morning. Tattersail thinks, oh, Hood's breath, and again tells the Marine to convey her reply and shuts the door. There's a rising tide of fear inside of her. Perrin asks what's wrong from the opposite doorway. Tattersail tells him to put his sword away and begins to rummage around in a dresser. She says, I'm to attend a dinner. Perrin says, an official gathering. Tattersail nods and says, with Adjunct Lorne there as well, as if Tayshrin isn't bad enough. Perrin murmurs, so she's finally arrived. Tattersail freezes and slowly turns to face him. She says, you've been expecting her, haven't you? Perrin starts and looks at her with frightened eyes. Tattersail realizes he hadn't meant to speak out loud. She hisses, damn it, you're working for her. Perrin spins around and vanishes in the other room. Tattersail's thoughts were a storm of fury. Quickben's suspicions had been accurate. A plan was afoot to kill the squad, and she wondered if that made her life at risk as well. She felt herself nearing a decision. She wasn't sure what the decision was yet, but there was a direction to her thoughts, and it had the momentum of an avalanche. Talk entered the Empire headquarters just as the 7th bell was ringing from a distant tower. He showed his invitation to a grim-faced, intense guard and was grudgingly allowed to continue on down the main hall to the dining chamber. His stomach turned uneasily. He knew the adjunct was behind the request, but she could be as unpredictable and manipulative as the rest. As he approached the doors, he thought the room might as well be a pit filled with vipers, all hungrily awaiting his arrival. He wondered if he'd be able to keep any food down, then grimly thinks about his scar, and whether anyone else in the room would be able to keep any food down when looking upon his face. That's sad.
It's really sad. It's really sad, but that's the one thing about soldiers. It's that they've seen a lot of this, so they don't think that's why the people that are around him don't think anything of it.
Yeah,
because they've seen a lot of these people torn up.
Yeah, the next statement. Among his fellow soldiers, his scars were barely noticed. Rare was the soldier in Dujak's army who did not carry a scar or 3. Those few friends he had seemed simply thankful that he still lived. So to your point, exactly, right? It's normal amongst them. They're just happy to see each other alive.
Yeah.
In 7 cities, superstition held that loss of an eye was also the birth of inner sight. He'd been reminded of that belief at least a dozen times in the last couple of weeks. I guess that goes again to show how heavily influenced by 7 cities culture this army is.
Yeah.
Right.
It's all 7 cities, man. It's always, love it.
There had been no secret gift granted him in exchange for his eye. Flashes of searing light ripped through his mind every now and then, but he suspected that was no more than a memory of the last thing his eye had seen. Fire. And this may be what I was remembering when we were talking last week. I mentioned something about him being able to see more than just the normal world with that blind eye. I don't know if I was just remembering this specific thing or if more happens with that.
Yeah, there is more that happens with this.
Okay. All right.
There is more that happens in this. Not so much in this book, I don't think necessarily. There's some hints.
Okay.
Because remember, I'll just stop right there.
Okay. Finally, at the doors, Talk is thinking now he was about to sit among the loftiest company in the Empire, barring the Empress herself. Suddenly, his wound was a thing of shame. He'd sit there as testament to the horrors of war. He wondered why the adjunct had invited him. He hesitated, shrugged, then entered. Dujek, Tayshrin, and the adjunct turned as one to regard him. He bowed. Lorne thanked him for coming and asked him to join them, noting they are only waiting for one more guest. Talk walked up to them and was thankful for Dujak's grin. Dujek made a show of scratching the stump of his missing arm, saying, "Bet it's driving you half crazed," his grin broadening. Talk says, "I scratch with both hands." Dujek laughs and offers Talk a drink. Lorne asks Talk if his horse has recovered. He nods and tells her the horse was doing handstands the last time he looked at her. Lorne smiles, though unsure if he's mocking her. She says, "I've explained your vital role in keeping me alive. How you loosed 4 arrows on the fly and brought down 4 Barghast. Talk looks up sharply and says, I didn't know I had the last 2 shots in me. He only shot 2, right? The others were killed by Lorne, the Marines, and Tool, right?
No, I think he actually got the 4. He loosed 4 arrows and brought down the 4 Barghast, I believe. But the way it was said, there's something in the way it said it kind of said it. It's worded weird.
I thought he looks at her sharply because she's trying to hide the fact that Tool is with her.
Oh, that's probably, you're right. Never mind. I think you're right. That's probably what it's about. And it's probably trying to hide him.
Okay.
Because no one wants to know that those guys are about.
Right. Dujek grunted, saying, Your father was also in the habit of surprising people. There's a man I miss. Looking down, Talk says, I too. The awkward silence is broken when Tattersail arrives. Talk is shocked at her appearance, having only seen her in battle attire. She's gussied up quite a bit, I guess. Lauren's greeting comes out much like a gasp. She says, We have met before, though I doubt you'd remember. Tattersail cautiously says, I think I would have recalled that. Lauren says, I think not. I was but 11 years old at the time. Tattersail says, Then you must be mistaken. I'm rarely in the company of children. That makes her 20.
Does that make her 20? Okay,
yeah, 9 years ago.
18? Okay, 9 years ago. Okay, thank you. I wasn't sure if it was 7 or 9. Okay, thank you. Okay, that's why I clicked. I was like, wait, that makes her. Yeah, she's the same age as Perrin. Just a year. As Perrin's 21, right?
Oh man,
they're both
like
20 or 21.
Yeah, he was 13 in the prologue, if I remember correctly, right?
Yeah. So it's 20. So 22.
Yeah,
he's 22. She's 20. So these are young people.
I mean,
I always think they're much older. They read much older to me.
Yeah, because people nowadays, you imagine a 20-year-old being this mature nowadays?
Please.
In today's society?
Yeah, no, not at all.
But then you have to remind yourself, this is a different time where people were forced to grow up much sooner.
Yes.
Yeah. So
that's right.
I have to keep reminding myself.
I have to remember that kind of stuff too, yeah.
Lauren says, They burned the mouse quarter a week after you swept through it, Tattersail. Her voice indicating a barely controlled rage. She continues, Those survivors, the one you left behind, were resettled in Mock's Hole. And in those plague-ridden caverns, my mother, my father, and my brother died. Okay, so I wanted to come back on the point of the healers that they were giving all the people in Pale. This
That's what I thought
right
you were
here.
gonna come back to.
Yes. So once you have them, that sentiment only lasts so long, and then you're okay, move on to the next, right?
That's right.
Take your healers to the next city that you conquered, and just leave the populace you have to die in plague-ridden caverns.
That's right. Take care of themselves. That's it. That's too funny.
Yeah. With this statement, the blood drains from Tattersail's face. Talk is bewildered. He looks at everyone else. Dujek's expression was masked, but there was a storm behind his eyes as he studied Lorne. A sudden light dawned on Tashrin's face as he studied Tattersail. Tattersail quietly says, It was our first command. Talk watched Lorne and she trembled. When she spoke, it was controlled, her words precise. She provides an explanation for the other guests. They were recruits, a cadre of mages. They were in Malaz City, awaiting their new commander, when the Master of the Claw issued an edict against sorcery. They were sent into the old city, the Mouse, to cleanse it. They were, her voice caught before she continued, indiscriminate. This woman was one of those mages. Sorceress, that night was my last with my family. I was given to the Claw the very next day. The news of my family's death was kept from me for years, yet I well remember that night, the blood, the screams. Tattersail seemed unable to speak. Finally, she is able to pry her eyes away from Lorne, and looks at Dujek, saying, High Fist, it was our first command. We lost control. I resigned from the officer corps the very next day and was posted with another army. If it is the adjunct's wish to convene a court, I offer no defense and will accept my execution as just penalty. Lorne says, That is acceptable, and reaches for her sword, preparing to draw it. Dujek jumps in, saying, No, it is not acceptable. Lorne freezes and glares at Dujek. She says, You seem to forget my rank. Dujek says, "No, I haven't." Adjunct: "If it is your will that those within the Empire who have committed crimes in the Emperor's name must be executed, then you must include me. Indeed, I believe High Mage Taishran also has his share of horror committed on the Emperor's behalf. And finally, there is the Empress herself to consider. Lasine, after all, commanded the Emperor's claw. She created it, in fact. More, the edict was hers, thankfully short-lived as it was." Turning to Tattersail, Dujek continues, "I was there, Tattersail, under Whiskey Jack's command. I was sent down to rein you in, which I did." Shaking her head, Tattersail asks, "Whiskey Jack commanded?" Her eyes narrowing. She says, "This has the taste of a god's game." Taishran voices his agreement with Dujek to Lorn. Tattersail says, "There's no need to have all this official. I hereby challenge you to a duel. On my behalf, I shall employ all my magical skills in an effort to destroy you. You may defend with your sword, Adjunct." Talk is about to step in to warn Tattersail, then realizes she already knows the sword will defeat her magic. Dujek angrily says to Tattersail, "Damn it, woman! Do you think everything hinges on how it's worded? Execution, duel, none of it matters one whit. All that the Adjunct does, all that she says, is on behalf of Empress Lasine." Turning to Lorn, he says, "You are here as Lasine's voice, as her will, Adjunct." Taishran reinforces Dujek's point by saying, "The woman named Lorn, the woman who once was a child, who once had a family, that woman does not exist. She ceased to exist the day she became the Adjunct." Anguish fills his eyes. Talk watches the Adjunct as she battles herself internally. Her anger is crushed, and from her eyes the icy, clinical repose of the Adjunct to the Empress becomes visible. Talk realizes he has just witnessed an execution. The woman named Lorn had risen from the past to right a wrong, to find justice, and in that last act reclaim her life, and she had been denied, not by the words of Dujek or Taishran, but by the thing known as the Adjunct. Lorn removes her hand from her sword and says, "Of course. Please enter, Sorceress Tattersail, and dine with us." Lorn's flat tone of voice shows Talk that this invitation has cost her nothing, and it horrifies him. Looking at Dujek and Taishran, Talk sees similar reactions. Tattersail looks ill, but shakily nods her head. Talk walks up to Tattersail and introduces himself while pouring a glass of wine for her. He makes a joke about the size of her traveling wardrobe and how it is a standing joke among the Second Army that if there is an ambush or unplanned skirmish, the enemy invariably came from Tattersail's wardrobe. Dujek guffaws and comments on wondering where that saying came from, noting that he even hears it from some of his officers. The atmosphere in the room relaxed somewhat. The only tension in the room remained between Taishran and Tattersail. Talk would see Tattersail looking at Lorn whenever Lorn's attention was elsewhere, and he could see the compassion in her eyes. His respect for Tattersail rose considerably. In Tattersail's shoes, Talk would be looking at the Adjunct with fear. Talk considers that Dujek's presence may have a leveling influence on the situation. Talk's father had spoken highly of Dujek, noting that he was a man who never lost his touch with the powerless or the less powerful. Studying Dujek now, Talk notes the man had not changed perceptibly from the one Talk the Elder had called friend. This impressed Talk, knowing the pressures that burdened Dujek. Once the first course had been served, Lorn addressed the group, complimenting Tattersail for besting a Hound of Shadow and on her timely recovery. Lorn says she knows Tattersail has been questioned by Taishran, but she would like to hear the tale directly from Tattersail herself. Tattersail tells Lorn that it's now clear that the gods have entered the fray. Specifically, they become involved with the Empire's plans for Darujistan. Talk attempts to excuse himself since he feels the matters exceed his pay grade. Lorn interrupts him and tells him to sit down since he is the Claw representative and will speak on the organization's behalf. He asks, "I am?" I guess he's the last man standing. He's the only one left.
Get that battlefield promotion there.
Yes. Lorn confirms he is. Talk sits back down. Lorn prompts Tattersail to continue. Tattersall goes on to tell Lorne that Opon is at the center, and their movement has created ripples, potentially attracting other gods. Lorne says Shadow Throne. Tayshrin agrees, but mentions that he has not been able to sense Shadow Throne's attention upon them, even though he pursued the possibility vigorously after the Hound's attack. Lorne again prompts Tattersall to continue. Tattersall claims the Hound's presence was triggered accidentally during a reading of the deck. The card of the Hound appeared during the reading, and she focused on it, which seemed to open a portal, created entirely from the other side of the card, from the House of Shadow itself. Tattersall asks Tayshrin if that's possible, since the Shadow Realm is new among the houses, and its full power is not yet expressed. Tayshrin says it's possible, then asks, then why did it appear in the street? Why not in your room? Tattersall proposes this was due to the wards placed around the apartment. The innermost of these are high Thyr. The last piece of information causes Tayshrin to start. I guess he didn't realize she's that powerful?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so.
Yeah. Tattersall goes on to state that since the Hound was in a transitional state between realms, it bounced off of her ward since it was unable to bring its full power to bear. But once in this realm, it was able to do so, and it did. Tayshrin wants to know how she fended off a Hound of Shadow. Tattersall simply says, luck, offering no further explanation.
All right.
Lorne says, in other words, you believe that Opon intervened. Tattersall says she does, and laughs when prompted by Lorne for further reasoning. Dujek asks if there's a way out. Tattersall says it's Darujhistan. Talk is suspicious that there is more to it than that. The adjunct tells Tattersall and Tayshrin to work together to find the details surrounding Opon's intervention. She then turns to Talk and asks for his evaluation of the situation as a claw. He's surprised at first, then realizes he was already acting in this capacity. He says he believes Tattersall is telling the truth as far as she knows. Lorne seems disappointed, but turns to Tayshrin and asks for his thoughts. Tayshrin believes the speculation is sound. The first course is removed, nearly untouched, and the second course is brought out. Everyone ate in silence. Talk was lost in thought. He had deceived everyone by covering for Tattersall. He has a lot of emotion tied up in the Second Army, and he remembers the mage cadre being ripped apart during the Battle of Pale. He did this for himself. Oddly, the scar stopped itching when he realizes this. What do you think that's about?
I don't know. I'm not really sure if it's leading up to to something in the future. I think it's all geared toward his own private storyline.
Okay. Tattersall is walking down the hallway to her room. She's wobbling due to her nerves being frazzled from the conversation at dinner.
I bet.
Yeah, that was intense. Lorne had awoken memories Tattersall had spent years burying. That memory had been but one nightmare among many, but it had pushed her into the Second Army, and that attachment had saved her life this night. She knew that Talk had lied for her. She thinks that her and Talk are similar in that they both had their humanity stripped in their training, but the Second Army had changed them. That was interesting to me. How if Talk is a claw, they kind of strip their humanity from them. And then the mages, we talked about them earlier, how they generally don't get that close to people. Yeah. So it's a similar...
It's a very similar path in a way.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Very loner style, or very loner lifestyle, I imagine. But the Second Army changes these people. They make you depend on them, and you depend on each other.
Correct. Tattersall approaches her door and checks the wards, finding nothing amiss. She enters and leans against the door as it closes behind her. Perrin steps into the room and quips that he's surprised she's not under arrest. She concurs. Perrin tells her that Hairlock left her a message. She asks what it is. Perrin tells her first Hairlock was excited to say Lorne isn't alone, that dust walks around the adjunct, the dirt shifts beneath her boots, and the wind whispers of frost and fire. Perrin asks if that explains anything, since it means nothing to him. Tattersall thinks it means something and asks if Hairlock said anything else. Perrin says that Hairlock told him Lorne and her companion were leaving Pale soon, and that he intended to track them. He says, sorceress, then pauses as if struggling with something. She prompts him to continue. He confesses to knowing something about the adjunct's mission, that he was to be her contact in Darujhistan. Tattersail is enraged and accuses Perrin of trying to kill Whiskey Jack and the bridge burners in Darujhistan. Perrin exclaims no and takes a step forward. Tattersail's hand shoots out defensively, palm up. Perrin asks her to wait and listen before she does anything. Her warren surges into her hand and she curses Opon for letting Perrin live. He begs her to let him talk. She gives him a chance. Perrin turns and sits down in a chair, hands at his sides. She warns him to keep his hands away from the sword. Perrin goes on to tell Tattersail about the adjunct's mission, which began in Itko Khan 3 years ago.
So I was 3 years ago. It goes from 7 to 7, 8, 9, 10. Well, that's 3 years ago. Okay, I'm confused on age. It's not a big deal. It's just on the Lauren and Perrin's age. We have it written down somewhere.
Yeah, it's like 2 to 3 years ago. I think they said in this case it was 3 years.
Yeah, she said 3.
Yeah.
So it was 3 years from the road on Itko Khan, and he was 19, 21. So he'd be 22.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. I think that's all I'm looking at is just that. That's it.
Yeah. Tattersail remembers the story Quickben and Kalam told her about the massacre on the coast in Itko Khan.
Yeah, something involving hounds.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Perrin tells her about the girl that had been taken, possessed by a god. Tattersail wants to know which god possessed her. Perrin sarcastically says, "Is it that hard to guess?" He tells her Shadowthrone comes to mind, but the god that possessed the girl was the rope. Tattersail closed her warren because it became too much to maintain. She says, "You found the girl." Perrin says they have. Tattersail says, "Her name's Sorry." Perrin is confused because both Tattersail and Whiskey Jack seem to be aware of the situation. Tattersail says Perrin is not alone in being confused. She also can't believe that this is all just a search for the girl. Perrin says that that's all he's aware of. Tattersail believes him, then asks about the details of the adjunct's mission. Perrin says all he knows is Lorne would be able to find him, and Sorry by extension, since he'd be with the squad. Tattersail says that it's possible for Lorne to have a link with Perrin, especially if he's been in her company for the past 2 years. Perrin asks why Lorne hasn't come to Tattersail's quarters then. Tattersail says Opon severed the link between them. Perrin grumbles, saying, "I dislike the thought of exchanging one set of shackles for another."
Right?
Tattersail says there is more to this, and tells Perrin that Lorne has a Talan Imass in her company. Perrin jerks upright. Tattersail notes Hairlock's snide hints gave it away. Also that the mission is twofold: kill Sorry, but also kill Whiskey Jack and his squad. The Odotaral sword may be enough to kill Sorry, and maybe even the rope, if that is who is possessing her. Perrin tries to push back, saying Whiskey Jack's squad is his command, his responsibility. The adjunct wouldn't betray him like that. Tattersail asks why she wouldn't. Perrin has no answer, only a stubborn look in his eyes. Tattersail reaches the decision she had sensed was coming. She notes that Hairlock left too early. He was too eager to pursue Lorne and the Talan Imass. Perrin asks who Hairlock's master is. Tattersail tells him it's Quickben, Whiskey Jack's mage, and that he's the best she's ever seen. Not in power, but smarts. But even Quickben won't be able to stand against a Talan Imass if he doesn't expect it. She stands and says she has to leave Pale. Perrin shoots to his feet and says, "Not alone." Tattersail says, "Alone," and explains she must find Whiskey Jack, and that if Perrin is with her, Lorne will be able to find him as well. Perrin still refuses to believe Lorne wishes Whiskey Jack any harm. He then asks if Tattersail is capable of killing Sorry, even with Quickben's help. Tattersail says she's not sure she wants to kill her, that it's up to Whiskey Jack. Perrin goes on to say that he can't just keep hiding there alone. Tattersail tells him she can get him out into the city where he can find a room in an inn to hide in for the next 2 weeks until she gets back. Perrin asks what happens if he walks up to Dujek and introduces himself. Tattersail says that Taishran will shred his brain with truth-seeking sorcery. Since Perrin is touched by Opon, and Opon is the enemy of the Malazan Empire after tonight, Taishran will leave Perrin to die when he is done with him. She tells him he will be alone if he walks, since Dujek won't be able or possibly willing to protect him. Perrin says he'll be alone when she leaves as well. She agrees, but says it won't be forever. She admits to him that despite the distrust between them, she is feeling things for him that she hasn't felt for anyone in a long time. After a little more back and forth, Perrin has a little suggestive innuendo to which Tattersail is responsive. He leads her to the bedroom. I've never liked this relationship between them. It really doesn't make sense to me.
No.
At least she does acknowledge that he's so young, but I think it's primarily the age difference between them that really grates at me, but also they don't even know each other that well. They weren't together very long and didn't even talk that much.
Well, there's a lot of it. It's just real. It's like it's a waste of breath, in all honesty, because this, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not trying to be spoilerish here, but I don't think this ever plays out into anything. It goes for a while, but it doesn't ever pan out. But I'm like you, though. This is one that it's still, even after reading through it multiple times, I'm like you. I've never liked this relationship between them.
Yeah.
It's never made sense to me either.
Yeah. I mean, there's 180 years age difference between them.
There is.
You know,
there is, but
you get a man and a woman, 30 years age difference. And it's a problem. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like they can't relate to each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
Add 150 years to that age difference.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Lorne is leaving Pale roughly an hour before dawn. There are no guards in sight, as promised by Dujek. She is wearing unadorned leather armor and disguised as a local, riding local horses. An hour after dawn, Lorne is walking the horses and is startled as Toole abruptly speaks at her side. He says, "I will walk with you for a time." She glares at him and says, "I would rather you announce your arrival from a distance." Toole says, "As you wish," and dissolves into the ground. This causes Lorne to curse in frustration. She sees him waiting 100 yards ahead of her. As she reaches him, she has to put her knees into the horse to calm it. She asks if he has to be so literal-minded and calls him Toole. And this is the first mention in the books of that name.
Right.
That's where that comes from.
Yeah.
He ignores the question about being literal-minded and tells her he accepts the name. She asks him why he was selected to accompany her. He says he is the last of his clan to survive the 28th Jaghut War in the lands west and north of 7 cities. And this is what you were referencing last week, that
yes.
Jaghut War, yeah.
Yeah.
Where half their number practically got taken out. Yeah. Lorne is surprised, saying she thought those wars only numbered 27. He tells her their bonecasters sensed an enclave of Jaghut, and the commander of the Logros Talan determined that they needed to exterminate them. Thus they did. And this is a little peek into the relationship between the Talan Imas and the Jaghut, going beyond simply numbering their wars, right?
Yeah.
To the point where they find out they exist, they have to exterminate them.
Yeah.
That's how they feel about them.
That's just it.
Yeah. Lorne says that explains their reduced number upon their return, and the Talan could have warned the Empress before they left. She was left without her most powerful army. Toole tells her that their return was not guaranteed. And here is an important quote. "The cessation of my clan's chieftain, Kig Aven, was accompanied by all my kin. Thus alone I am unbound to Logro. Kig Aven's bonecaster was Kalava Onas, who has been lost since long before the Emperor reawakened us." End quote. Two things here. One, the Emperor reawakened them. That's pretty important. Two, the name Kalava Onas. Remember how early this name is mentioned, because we'll come back to it later. But, I mean, we're a third of the way into the first book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she's already mentioned here, so.
Lorne's mind was racing. She was unused to Talan being this loquacious. They were referred to as the silent host. Maybe his unbounding has something to do with his willingness to speak. Only the commander ever spoke to humans on a regular basis before this. Additionally, as far as the bonecasters were concerned, they normally stayed out of sight. The only one that had ever appeared was one named Olar Ethiel.
Another name.
Yeah. Who stood alongside the clan chieftain Aethelos Ilm during the Battle of Kartul, which had seen an exchange of sorcery that made Moon's spawn look like a child's cantrip. That must have been a heck of a sight then.
Yeah.
Yeah. But as you mentioned...
Yeah, I didn't mean to jump the game. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump the gun on that one, but yeah.
That's well in advance of seeing that name again. So
these are some main players, people. Remember these names.
Yeah. I just think it's interesting. I'm pointing them out as they come in, not to kind of spoil anything, but for you to kind of see how far ahead he's setting stuff up.
I know, it's wild.
It's crazy.
I'm blown away by that setting up.
Yeah.
I mean, this stuff doesn't play out till 6-7 books later.
Yeah. Lauren thinks to herself that she had already learned more in this conversation than all the information that was available in the Empire Annals. The Emperor had known much more, but making records wasn't his style. Even the rumor that the Emperor had awakened the Talani Mass wasn't truly confirmed until Toole had just said it. Lauren asks if Toole has met the Emperor personally. Toole says, as he sat upon the first throne, as with all the other Talani Mass, Toole knelt before him.
Yeah.
She asks if the Emperor was alone. Toole says Dancer was with him. She asks the location of the first throne. Toole tells her that the Talan gathered mines, a rare thing that was last done before the diaspora, and a binding resulted. None of the Logros or Kron Talan Imass would be able to reveal the location of the throne because it was in that binding. Lauren asks who are the Kron. Toole says, they are coming. That is menacing.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Sweat springs up on the adjunct's brow. She is thinking that the Logros numbered 19,000 before they returned from the last Jaghut War. Their numbers now are closer to 14,000. She wonders if another 19,000 were about to arrive. What had the Emperor unleashed? She asks Toole what is the significance of the Kron returning. He says, the year of the 300th millennium approaches. She asks, what happens then? He says, adjunct, the diaspora ends. I love how that's written. It's so epic.
It is. It's just
it's a cliffhanger.
And I just love, and Toole is one of those people I love so dearly. You know, he's one of those characters I love a lot. And it's partly just, I think, because he is loquacious. And he's not very loquacious at all, but compared to the other guys, it's like, yeah, this guy talks a lot. And we learn a lot. I love him because we learn a lot of important info from him.
Yeah.
And he's a very interesting character in and of himself.
Yeah. We get to see a lot of him. Yeah.
Yeah. Love him.
Crone is riding the winds above the Revi plain. She is flying north to another master, Caladan Brood. She senses the convergence of forces, gods entering the fray, and she has never felt more alive. Black Dog Forest is visible to the north. And thus the chapter ends.
Great chapter.
It was a lot of information in this chapter.
There's a lot of action, a lot of just brutality, and then the chapter winds down with a lot of info. Of info.
Info dump.
Yeah, info dump after the brutality, because I mean that is a brutal intro to Toole.
What an intro.
Yeah.
All right, for standout moments, there's going to be a trend here. They mostly involve Dujek.
Yes, and I'm going to be in agreement with all of you on your moments because it's a great chapter.
Dujek's handling of the census records to prevent the culling of the nobility, very slick, very crafty. Loved it.
Very fun and very funny.
Yeah, Tayshrin's reaction in particular.
Yes, him dealing with Tayshrin, like, what are you talking about? You know, I'll help you. I'll help you look into that if you need some help. I love it.
It's like one of those fire investigators that's the actual arsonist themselves.
Yes. Yes.
Tattersail's hand waving the magic to make Perrin invisible. I mean, that just cracked me up with the image of there are no droids here.
I had never thought about that. So you put that in my mind. I was never going to be able to unsee that now. No one can see you.
Yeah. Dujek making Tok feel more comfortable by scratching his own stump at the dinner. That was real stand-up moment right there.
Yeah, a very big stand-up moment there.
Yeah. Like a real bro.
Yeah.
Just making him feel better. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Dujek stepping in to make Lorne realize that they all have blood on their hands.
Yes.
Yeah. So de-escalating the situation.
Oh, they're all. I was gonna say, yeah, they're all swimming in it, dude. Come on.
Yes. Yeah. I really enjoyed Tool disappearing after Lorne gets pissy with him for Starlinger. He's like, just disappears back into the ground.
It shows right back up. He's very literal. I love it. Just, okay, I'll do it. No problem.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
And he said, "As you wish," and I get a Princess Bride thing there.
See, and I still haven't seen that. My wife, she referenced that the other day. I must watch that now because it's two have spoken. It must be seen.
You're gonna love it. It's
okay.
It's a classic.
You two have spoken and said it, so I'll tell her that we have reached a conclave that y'all will make me watch Princess Bride.
Okay.
So,
all right. And then all the information that Tool reveals about the Talani mass. It's so interesting, and it only whets your appetite to learn more.
Oh, absolutely. Especially because they just dropped that note on there like, and we're into the diaspora ends because, we've been out here for 300,000 years.
Yeah.
And who else has been out here 300,000 years? Rake's been out here that same time.
Yeah.
These are some long-lived folks. That's why I love these immortals over, nobody has immortality like these guys.
Right.
These are some old folks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool. You got any final thoughts?
No, just a fantastic episode, dude.
Yeah, good job tonight. All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We'll see you next week.
Yes. See you next week.
We thank you all for joining us today.
Again, we really like to thank you for taking the time to be with us, and we've had a really great time talking about the topic today.
If you would like to support our show, you can find us at HorseFrogProductions.com, where you can find our Patreon link. Depending on the platform you're listening from, it may also be in the episode description.
And if you'd like to contact us through email, it's at contact@horsefrogproductions.com.